Spent the last 2 weeks trying to prepare for this video, trying to think of a decent police-related joke or pun to start this video. Ultimately, I couldn't really think of one, so I just bought myself some donuts to munch on. Honestly, what a cop-out. Hello everyone, I'm Brian from UK Gaming Network, also known as UKGN Zoidberg. Welcome to the re-review, where I get to replay and reassess games from my favourite gaming era. Back in 1991, I was lucky enough to play games and then write about them for a living, with my opinions appearing in magazines such as GamesX, Amiga Action and PlayStation Zone. Whether or not these opinions still stand all these years later is what we're here to find out. So join me as I take one game that I previously reviewed, tell you a little bit about the history of it, then play it again to see whether or not the years have been kind. Did I score it correctly first time around, or was I well off the mark? In this episode, I'm going to be taking a fresh look at the Amiga version of Cisco Heat, developed by ICE Software and published by Imageworks in 1991. As an arcade game developer, Jaleco are not as well known as your Capcom, Konami or Sega, but they have a huge number of titles to their credit since they were founded in 1982. To Amiga owners, they're probably more well known for the excellent Rodland, which I had at number 34 on my top 100 Amiga games that I published last year. They also produced the excellent shooters Saint Dragon and P-47 the Freedom Fighter. In 1989, they launched the Paris-Dakar-inspired racing game Big Run into arcades. This had been created by a small team called Bitbox, who were founded by a number of ex-Sega employees who knew a thing or two about making a racing game. After it was well received, this team were officially merged into Jaleco themselves, and for their next game they produced Cisco Heat. Based around something that the game called the All-American Police Car Race, which sounds like something that should exist in the real world but sadly doesn't, this saw the player race along 5 stages through the streets of San Francisco, driving a police cruiser. You would drive past locations such as the Golden Gate Bridge and Chinatown, while racing against both the clock and some AI opponents. This was a structure that had worked well for Big Run previously, and the fact that you were racing a police car in this one made it stand out from the crowd. The San Francisco setting as well, with its hills, trams and 90-degree corners, made it look spectacular and feel different too. Rights to the home conversions were picked up by Microsoft to be published under the Imageworks label, and the development duties were handed to Glasgow-based ICE Software, who had previously made Turbo Outrun and Chase HQ 2. Ironically, the Amiga version of Cisco Heat ended up coming out a few months before the Sales Curves version of Big Run. The Amiga version of Cisco Heat was programmed by ICE Software company founder Ian Morrison, who had a string of well-regarded Spectrum games to his name, including Beachhead, Raid Over Moscow and Nightmare Rally. Following the closure of ICE Software, he would go on to make a version of Robotron for the N64. Graphics were by Alan Greer, who had previously provided the artwork for the Amiga versions of 1943, Outrun and Tiger Road while working for Probe Software. After his time with ICE Software, his games would include the Itchy and Scratchy game and Wolverine Adamantium Rage on the SNES, Die Hard Vendetta for the GameCube, and then finally Dino Dini's Kickoff Revival on the PlayStation 4 in 2017. With the release of Fire Force in 1992, a game which I believe didn't get the attention it deserves, ICE would make the switch from software developer to publisher, although the games that they released would vary wildly in quality. I liked both Mean Arenas and Deep Core, but I wasn't impressed with the Amiga version of Total Carnage, which somehow managed to have a control method even worse than the one in Smash TV, or their truly terrible adaptation of the animated classic Akira. Now let's go back and see what I had to say about Cisco Heat in my original review. My review appeared in issue 32 of GamesX from December 1991, which was the exact same issue as my WWF WrestleMania review that I discussed in episode 20. The cover game on that issue was Oh No More Lemmings, which was an expansion pack for the classic puzzle game, and Game of the Week was the long-awaited Epic from Ocean Software. Reading back my review, I didn't say an awful lot about the game that was positive, yet I somehow managed to give it a score of 4 X's out of 5. Both the game's presentation and gameplay earned themselves a thoroughly average 11 out of 20, with the last ability faring slightly better at 13 out of 20. I said that it was definitely the best game to date to have come out of ICE Software, and easily better than their woeful version of Chase HQ 2. Despite the graphics being a little bit jerky, I said that they managed to convey a good sense of speed. I wasn't impressed with the sound effects though. The cars and roadside objects are nicely detailed. The front end of the game resembles the arcade version, however the sound really lets it down. How does the game stack up when played today? It's time for the playtest to find out. Right, so you get to choose which of the two police cars you want to race. So I'm just going to go with the one on the left first. This is like a more of a standard police car. Now this was released at a time when Lotus 1 and 2 already existed. Let's bear that in mind as I'm playing this. I think in general, conversions of arcade racing games to the Amiga didn't go particularly well. For every game that worked, like Super Hang-On, you've probably got 5 or 6 others that didn't. And I would include the previous games made by ICE Software in that list. Their conversions of Chase HQ 2 and Turbo Outrun do leave a lot to be desired. Although they're still not quite as bad as the original Outrun, it must be said. I think it's almost instantly apparent that this game is far better than the previous 2 racing games this developer had made. I think it is pretty messy graphically, but I think you could actually say the same about the arcade original. So that's not really a fault of the developers. There's certainly a lot going on in the game, like with all the trams coming up the hills as you're racing, all the traffic everywhere, and the 90-degree corners. It can be quite difficult to see what's happening a lot of the time. I do find it quite odd that the other police cars that are your opponents are not very obviously highlighted. There's no arrows over the top of them to tell you that this is one of your race opponents. So you just have to kind of guess whether or not you're overtaking somebody to get a new position or not. Even though the movement is pretty jerky, and thanks to the pretty low frame rate, I think it actually does a pretty decent job of conveying a sense of speed. According to the developers, this is actually an accurate representation of the actual map of San Francisco. Having never been there, I can't say for sure if that's the case. Although I have played the Driver series, and this doesn't look anything like that. I think the accuracy probably just refers to certain street names that keep flashing up on screen every now and then. So turning left from one street into another, for instance, is correct. So let's try the other car for the next playthrough. Although the game claims that there is a difference between the cars, I think the only real difference is visual. It's a shame that the developers didn't see fit to include any kind of multiplayer mode in this. The arcade cabinets could of course be linked together to allow 2 players to race against each other. Although considering the low frame rate that we get for the single player mode, multiplayer mode would probably be virtually unplayable. Beeping the horn supposedly gets other road users to move out of your way. I don't really see that happening there. The controls on this are not quite what you would expect. I should probably also point that out. Changing gear is actually done with the press of the space bar, whereas normally it would be the fire button. The fire button is actually reserved for
beeping your horn. Being able to program those controls on the A500 Mini actually helps a great deal. I think I've crashed too many times to reach the checkpoint this time. And game over again. So yeah, let's end the playtest there and get on and wrap things up in the re-review itself.
As far as arcade conversions go, Cisco Heat is actually better than the majority of others on the Amiga. We'd had to suffer some truly appalling interpretations of classic games over the years, including quite a few by ICE Software themselves, so this is essentially damning it with fake praise. Like I said during the playtest, when this released, fans of racing games had been treated to Lotus 2 just a few months earlier, and where that game is incredibly smooth with a fantastic sensation of speed, this is slow and jerky by comparison. I know which game I'd rather be playing in 2023. Is it a good game? No, not really, but it is a surprisingly enjoyable one. The setting and course design make it stand out, and like a good arcade game, you'll always feel like you can do slightly better next time. Unfortunately, also because it's an arcade game, there are only 5 stages in total, and it won't take you very long to beat them all. The sheer amount of obstacles on the course make the races as much about memorising where to drive as they are about speed, although this element of the gameplay gets a little more frustrating the further you get into the game. The final stage in particular really did start to test my patience. Here's the Amiga Arcade Racing Super League, and as you can see, Cisco Heat sits comfortably in the middle. There are a lot of games that were worse than it, but also a lot that were better. My original review didn't read like a 4-star review at all, so I definitely need to correct that. If I was going to be reviewing it today, I'd probably give it 5 out of 10, or possibly a 6 if it caught me on a good day. Thank you for watching this episode of the re-review. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you've played Cisco Heat back in the day, then why not tell me what you thought of it? And I would also really like to know what you thought the best arcade conversion on the Amiga was as well. All opinions expressed in this video are entirely mine and not those of the UK Gaming Network team. If you enjoyed this video, then please give us a like and subscribe, and if you've missed any previous episodes, you can catch the rest in a nice little playlist right here on our channel. I'm going to be back in 2 weeks' time playing another game from my time writing on magazines, and if you want to know what that game that's going to be, stick around to the end for a little musical hint. If you want to find out what games I'm currently playing, or ask me any questions about my time as a reviewer, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at UKJNZoidberg. Thank you for watching, and until next time, happy retro gaming. Bye for now.